All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep on something called personal epistemology.
Ooh, that sounds dense.
It does, right?
Right.
But before you tune out, think of it like this. It's basically about, your own ideas about knowledge. Like, what does it even mean to really know something?
Interesting.
All right, and how do you figure out what's actually true, what's credible?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're bombarded with information all the time.
Exactly. And especially for someone like you, our listener, who's all about, learning new stuff effectively and having those awesome aha moments. Understanding this can be a total game changer. It's like sharpening your learning toolkit.
I like that, a learning toolkit. So what are we using to guide this deep dive?
Well, we're diving deep into a research paper by Barbara K. Hoffer. It's from 2001, and it's called Personal Epistemology Research: Implications for Learning and Teaching.
Okay, so we're talking about how our beliefs about knowledge affect how we learn and how we're taught.
Exactly. And our mission today is to really break down what this whole field of personal epistemology is all about. How it works, how it affects you as a learner, and what you can actually do with this knowledge.
Sounds good to me. Let's dive in.
Okay, so first things first. What exactly is personal epistemology? Like, in plain English, what are we talking about here?
Well, philosophers have been debating the big abstract nature of knowledge forever, right?
Right.
But psychologists, they've gotten more interested recently in how us regular folks, you and me, how we actually think about knowledge, how we come to know things.
So, like, not just the big philosophical stuff, but how our individual brains deal with knowledge.
Exactly. And a lot of this stemmed from Piaget's work, the guy who studied how kids' understanding of the world develops.
Okay, Piaget, right?
Yeah. He was really focused on the dynamic back and forth between the learner and what they're learning.
So he laid some groundwork for understanding how our views of knowledge change as we grow up.
He did. He did. And since then, there's been a ton of research and a bunch of different terms have popped up, like epistemological beliefs, reflective judgment, ways of knowing, all sorts of stuff.
Sounds kind of complicated.
It can be, but the good news is that personal epistemology can basically be used as an umbrella term for all these different ideas about how we think about knowledge and knowing.
Okay, so an umbrella term for thinking about how we think about knowledge. Got it.
Exactly.
So under this umbrella, what are the big questions researchers are trying to answer? Like, what are the core parts of this personal epistemology thing?
Well, they look at a few main things. Like, first off, what do you actually think knowledge is?
Like, is it facts and figures or something more?
Yeah, is it fixed and unchanging?
Yeah.
Or is it something that's constantly evolving?
Interesting.
Then there's how you think knowledge is actually built. Do you just soak it up passively? Or are you actively involved in creating your understanding?
Like, are we sponges or builders?
Yeah, good analogy. And how do you even decide if something is true or not? Like, what are your criteria? What are your standards?
Yeah, how do we sift through all the noise?
Right. And where do you think knowledge even comes from? Is it all external authorities, textbooks and experts?
Or can it come from inside, like from our own experiences?
Exactly. And then there's the question of how knowing happens. Is it like a sudden flash of insight?
A eureka moment.
Exactly. Or is it more of a slow, gradual building process?
Makes you think.
Oh.
It feels like all of this is going on in our heads without us even realizing it.
Oh, absolutely. It's all under the surface,
Right.
shaping how we approach learning and everything else.
So how do researchers even study this stuff? It's all internal, right?
Well, there are two main paths they've taken. One is looking at developmental models.
Okay, developmental models.
Yeah. The idea here is that our thinking about knowledge goes through stages. It matures as we grow up and our brains develop.
So, like, we progress through different levels of understanding about knowledge.
Exactly. The other approach is to look at personal epistemology as a bunch of separate beliefs that we hold.
Okay, so not necessarily stages, but just individual beliefs that can be all over the place.
Right. And these beliefs might not all develop at the same rate or even in a specific order.
Interesting. So, two different ways of looking at the same thing.
Yep. Two sides of the same coin.
All right, let's start with those developmental models. What's the basic idea behind them? What's the journey our thinking about knowledge might take?
So the main idea is that as we get older and our brains develop, our understanding of knowledge and how it works gets more complex. You could think of it like climbing a ladder,
Each rung is a more advanced way of thinking about knowledge.
Right, exactly. Not everyone starts at the bottom or reaches the top, and some folks might skip a step or two.
But there's a general upward trend towards more sophisticated thinking.
Exactly.
Okay, and the paper talks about 5 main models.
Yeah.
right? Can you give us a quick rundown of each one?
Sure. Let's start with the Perry scheme. This one's a classic. Imagine you're starting out with this black and white view of the world.
Like, everything is either right or wrong.
Exactly. And teachers are these all-knowing beings who hold the truth.
Okay, so pretty simplistic.
Yeah, it's dualism. But then, as you learn more, you start to realize that there are lots of different viewpoints out there.
The world gets a little grayer.
Right. But at first, you might think all those viewpoints are equally valid, you know?
Okay, so you move from one right answer to all answers being right.
Yeah, that's multiplism. But then you start to realize that some viewpoints are actually better supported than others. Like some have more evidence, they make more sense.
So you're getting more critical and discerning.
Exactly. That's relativism. And finally, you might reach this point where you can make your own judgments and take action, even when there's no single right answer.
So you're comfortable with uncertainty and complexity.
Exactly. That's commitment within relativism. So with the Perry scheme, it's this journey from seeing knowledge as absolute and certain to understanding it as more contextual, you know?
And being able to make informed decisions even when things are messy.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, what's the second model?
The second one is women's ways of knowing. It builds on Perry's work, but it really focuses on how women specifically come to understand and know things.
So acknowledging that gender might play a role in our views on knowledge.
Right. This model looks at things like the source of knowledge, the role of personal experience, and the idea of the self as a knower.
Okay, so it brings in those personal elements more strongly.
Exactly. There are different positions in this model, like silence, where women might feel like they don't have a voice or the ability to know.
Like being shut out from knowledge.
Right. Then there's received knowing, which is kind of like Perry's dualism, you know, accepting knowledge from authorities without questioning it.
Taking things at face value.
Then there's subjective knowledge, where personal experience becomes really important. This is kind of similar to multiplism, but it emphasizes the individual's own perspective.
So valuing your own lived experience as a source of knowledge.
Exactly. Then we have procedural knowledge, which is where you start to develop more conscious ways of knowing and applying knowledge. This one has two subcategories: connected knowing, which is more empathetic and relational, and separate knowing, which is more detached and objective.
Interesting. So different ways of engaging with and using knowledge.
Right. And finally, there's constructed knowledge, where women integrate intuition and reason, and they see knowledge as something that's actively built and shaped by their own experiences and interactions.
So you're not just receiving knowledge passively, you're actively creating it.
Exactly. So women's ways of knowing really highlights those personal and relational aspects of how we come to know things.
Okay, that makes sense. On to model number 3.
The third model is Baxter-Magolda's epistemological reflection model.
Okay, Baxter-Magolda, what's the focus here?
This one's all about how our assumptions about knowledge affect how we make sense of our educational experiences. Like, how do our beliefs shape our learning journey?
So our preconceived notions about knowledge can influence how we learn in school.
Right. She identified several ways of knowing. The first is absolute knowing, which is a lot like dualism, you know, believing there are right answers and experts have them.
Okay, familiar territory.
Then you have transitional knowing, where people start to see some cracks in that absolute certainty. They start to question things a little more.
A bit of healthy skepticism.
Exactly. Then there's independent knowing, where individuals start to value their own thinking and opinions more. They're not just relying on authorities, they're forming their own conclusions.
So becoming more autonomous in your thinking.
Right. And finally, you have contextual knowing, where people really start to understand that knowledge is always situated within a specific context. What's true in one situation might not be true in another.
So knowledge is more nuanced and less about absolute truth.
Exactly. And Baxter-Magolda also noted some interesting gender differences in how people move through these different ways of knowing, at least in the early stages.
So gender continues to be a factor in how we approach knowledge.
It seems so. The takeaway here is to really think about how your own assumptions about knowledge, whether you realize them or not, are shaping how you engage with learning.
Like, they're the lens through which we view our education.
Exactly.
Okay, model number 4 coming up.
This one is the reflective judgment model by King and Kitchener.
Reflective judgment, what's that all about?
This model looks at how people reason about their beliefs and justify them, especially when they're dealing with problems that don't have easy answers.
So not just what you believe, but how you think about your beliefs.
Exactly. It's about how you arrive at your conclusions and how you defend them, especially in those messy, real-world situations where there's no clear right or wrong.
Okay, so like being able to think critically about complex issues.
Right. It differs from typical critical thinking, which is more focused on solving problems with a right answer.
Interesting distinction.
Yeah. So they have 7 stages of reflective judgment grouped into 3 main levels.
3 levels, 7 stages. Okay, lay it on me.
All right. The first level is pre-reflective thinking. At this level, people tend to rely on authority figures or their own gut feelings to form their beliefs. They don't really question things or look for evidence.
So it's a more passive approach to knowledge.
Right. Then you have quasi-reflective thinking.
Sure.
Here, people start to recognize that there might be different perspectives and that knowledge can be uncertain, but they still struggle to justify their own opinions with evidence or logic.
So they see the complexity but don't quite know how to navigate it.
Exactly. And then finally, you have reflective thinking. At this level, people really understand that knowledge is constructed, that it's based on evidence and reasoning, and they can evaluate different perspectives and form their own well-supported conclusions.
So they're actively engaging with knowledge and using critical thinking skills.
Exactly.
So with the reflective judgment model, we're moving from just accepting things at face value to really thinking deeply about why we believe what we believe and how we can support our views.
Precisely.
Okay, makes sense. And what about the last developmental model?
The last one is Kuhn's model of the skills of argument. She was looking at how people argue and what kind of reasoning they use, especially in social situations where there's conflict or disagreement.
So, like how our beliefs about knowledge play out and how we debate and argue with others.
Exactly. She identified 3 main stages. The first is the absolutist stage, where people think there's only one right answer, and they're usually pretty sure they have it.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, very black and white thinking.
Eh.
Then you have the multiplist stage, which is kind of like multiplism in the Perry scheme. People recognize that there are different opinions, but they think everyone's entitled to their own view, and there's no way to really judge which is better.
Okay, so everyone gets a trophy.
Something like that. And finally, there's the evaluativist stage. At this stage, people can evaluate different arguments based on their evidence, logic, and how well they address the issue at hand.
So they're not just looking at opinions, they're looking at the quality of the arguments.
Exactly. What's really interesting about Kuhn's work is she emphasizes how these beliefs actually play out in real-world situations, like how people make decisions as jurors in a trial.
So it's not just theoretical, it has real-world consequences.
Right. So her work shows us how our epistemological beliefs, our beliefs about knowledge, can actually shape how we interact with others and make decisions.
Okay, that's fascinating. So across all 5 of these models, there's a pretty clear trend. We start with a more simplistic view of knowledge, like it's all black and white, there's always a right answer.
Right.
And as we develop, we move towards a more nuanced and complex understanding. We recognize that knowledge can be uncertain, that context matters, and that evidence and reasoning are crucial for making judgments.
Exactly. It's a journey from simple to complex, from absolute to relative.
Okay, so we've covered those developmental models. Now let's shift gears and talk about that other perspective, epistemology as a system of independent beliefs. What's the main idea here?
This approach, which is largely based on the work of Marlene Schamer, suggests that our beliefs about knowledge don't necessarily develop in these neat stages like climbing a ladder.
Okay, so not a linear progression.
Right. Instead, we might have a whole bunch of different beliefs about knowledge, and these beliefs can vary in strength and might not all develop at the same pace.
So more like a mixed bag of beliefs.
Exactly. It's like having different opinions on different topics, you know? Your view on politics might be completely different from your view on, say, music.
Right, our beliefs can be all over the map.
Exactly. And this is how Schamer sees our beliefs about knowledge.
So how do researchers actually study these individual beliefs? How do they measure them?
Well, Schamer developed a questionnaire called the Epistemological Beliefs Questionnaire.
Okay, a questionnaire. Makes sense.
Yeah, it's designed to tap into different dimensions of our beliefs about knowledge and learning.
And what are those key dimensions? What are the big things she's looking at?
Her research consistently finds 4 main factors. First, there's the belief in certain knowledge.
Certain knowledge.
Right. This is all about whether you see knowledge as fixed and absolute, or whether you see it as tentative and evolving.
So are you a black and white thinker, or do you see shades of gray?
Exactly. The second factor is the belief in simple knowledge. This is about whether you see knowledge as isolated bits of information or as a complex web of interconnected ideas.
So is it all about memorizing facts, or is it about understanding the bigger picture?
Exactly. The third factor is the belief in quick learning. This is about whether you think learning should happen quickly and effortlessly, or if you accept that it usually takes time and effort.
Like, are you looking for shortcuts, or are you willing to put in the work?
Right. And the final factor is the belief in fixed ability. This is about whether you think intelligence is something you're born with and can't really change, or whether you believe it's something that can grow and develop with effort.
So are you stuck with what you've got, or can you become smarter?
Exactly. So those are the four biggies.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Someone who believes that knowledge is certain, comes in simple bits, should be learned quickly, and that they have a fixed level of intelligence, they're going to approach learning very differently than someone who believes the opposite of all those things.
Well, absolutely. And Schamer's research has been really helpful in showing how these specific beliefs can impact how we learn, the strategies we use, and even how well we do in school.
So our beliefs about knowledge are not just some abstract idea, they have real consequences.
They really do. And for you, the listener, it's worth thinking about where you fall on these spectrums.
Yeah, like, do you see knowledge as certain or uncertain, simple or complex?
Exactly. Because these beliefs can actually create roadblocks in your learning journey.
Like, if you think learning should be easy and quick, you might give up too easily when you hit a challenge.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've got the developmental models, we've got the independent beliefs approach. The paper also mentions a couple of other ideas like personal theories and epistemological resources. Can you tell us about those?
Sure. So some researchers think that our beliefs about knowledge might be organized into more coherent personal theories.
Personal theories.
Yeah, like integrated sets of beliefs that might even be different depending on the subject matter. So your theory about how knowledge works in history might be different from your theory about how it works in science, for example.
So our beliefs about knowledge can be tailored to different fields.
Exactly. Then there's the idea of epistemological resources. This one's even more fine-grained. It suggests that we have these kind of basic intuitions or resources about knowledge that we use in different situations.
So it's not just about stable beliefs, but more about how we think about knowing in the moment.
Right. It's less about your overall belief system and more about the specific ways you think about knowing in a particular context. Like, when you're solving a math problem, you might use different resources than when you're writing a poem.
Okay, so it's more flexible and situational.
Exactly. The main takeaway here is that our thinking about knowledge can be pretty adaptable and context-dependent.
Okay, so it's not just one size fits all. It sounds like the field of personal epistemology is pretty complex.
It is, but it's all ultimately aimed at understanding how we as individuals make sense of the world and the knowledge that's out there.
All right, so we've covered what personal epistemology is. We've looked at the different ways researchers study it. Now let's talk about what really matters for our listener. How does all of this connect to learning and teaching?
Right, let's get practical.
Why should someone who wants to learn effectively care about this stuff?
Well, there are three main ways personal epistemology is connected to learning. First, there's the developmental perspective.
Okay, developmental perspective.
This view sees the growth of more sophisticated thinking about knowledge as a central goal of education.
So, like, developing our personal epistemology should be part of what we learn in school.
Exactly. The second perspective is the belief perspective.
Belief perspective.
This one focuses on how the specific beliefs we hold actually influence how we learn and what we get out of learning.
Okay, so our beliefs can either help or hinder our learning.
Exactly. And then the third perspective is the theories and resources perspective.
Theories and resources.
This one emphasizes that how we think about knowledge depends a lot on the context and that our thinking can be pretty flexible.
Okay, so our understanding of knowledge is not static.
Yeah.
It adapts to the situation.
Right. Understanding these connections is key for becoming a more effective learner.
All right, so let's explore each of these connections.
Yeah.
First, the developmental perspective, the idea that growing our personal epistemology is part of education. What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, the core idea is that developing those more mature, reflective ways of thinking about knowledge is super important for higher level thinking skill.
Like critical thinking and problem solving.
Exactly. And a lot of research using those developmental models we talked about, like Perry's and King and Kitchener's, shows that college, and even more so grad school, can actually push people toward more sophisticated thinking about knowledge.
So higher education can help us grow our personal epistemology.
It can, but here's the interesting thing, that kind of really advanced thinking about knowledge isn't all that common, even among adults.
So it's not something that just happens naturally for everyone.
It seems not. So if you actively work on this, you're already ahead of the game.
So consciously developing our personal epistemology can give us an edge.
Absolutely. It's not just a theoretical thing. It has real practical implications for how we learn and think.
Okay, now what about that second perspective? How our specific beliefs about knowledge affect our learning.
This is where Schammer's work on independent beliefs really comes in. There's a lot of research showing that those specific beliefs can really shape how we take in and process information.
So our beliefs are like filters on our learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, if you're really attached to the idea that knowledge is certain and absolute, you might not be open to new information that challenges your existing views.
You might get stuck in your ways.
Right. Or if you think learning should always be fast and easy, you might not put in the effort needed to really understand tough concepts.
You'd give up too easily.
Exactly. So those beliefs can really hold you back. And on the flip side, if you believe that knowledge is complex and evolving, you're more likely to keep learning and growing.
You're more adaptable.
Right. And research has shown that specific beliefs, like believing in simple knowledge or quick learning, can actually hurt your ability to understand complex ideas and lead to oversimplified conclusions.
So our beliefs are not just passive. They're actively shaping how we learn.
They are. And they also affect something called self-regulated learning.
Self-regulated learning.
Yeah, it's basically about how well you manage your own learning process, like the goals you set, the strategies you use, how well you monitor your own understanding.
Okay, so being in control of your learning.
Right. And those beliefs about knowledge, they play a big role in that. Like, if you think your intelligence is fixed, you're less likely to push through challenges. You might think, I'm just not smart enough for this.
You'd hit a wall and give up.
Exactly. And there's also a connection to how open you are to changing your mind about things. If you're really attached to the idea that knowledge is certain and unchanging, you might resist new evidence that contradicts what you already believe.
You'd be closed off to new ideas.
Right. And that can make it hard to learn and grow.
Okay, so it's not just about being smart. It's about being open to new possibilities.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that our beliefs about knowledge can be different depending on the subject. Like, your beliefs about how knowledge works in science might be totally different from your beliefs about how it works in literature.
Right, so we might be more flexible in some areas than others.
Exactly. And those domain-specific beliefs, they can also affect how we learn in those particular areas.
Makes sense. All right, what about that third perspective, the one that talks about personal theories and epistemological resources? How does that relate to learning?
Well, these perspectives really highlight the idea that our thinking about knowledge is often very tied to the specific situation we're in.
So it's not just about having fixed beliefs, it's about adapting our thinking to the task at hand.
Exactly. Like, if you see personal epistemology as the set of flexible tools rather than just these rigid beliefs or stages, then learning is all about using the right tools for the job.
So having a diverse toolkit and knowing when to use each tool.
Right. It's about developing those different ways of thinking about knowledge and being able to switch between them as needed. Like, sometimes you need to be really analytical and critical, and other times you need to be more open and exploratory.
So it's about having that cognitive flexibility.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered how our personal epistemology, our beliefs about knowledge, are deeply connected to how we learn.
Right. It's all intertwined.
Now, let's talk about the teaching side.
Mm-hmm.
How can educators use this knowledge to help their students learn better? And what can we, as learners, do to apply this to our own lives?
Right. Let's talk application.
So what can teachers do to make this work in the classroom?
Well, the key thing to remember is that it's a two-way street.
Two-way street.
Yeah, the students' beliefs and their level of development, they affect how they experience the teaching. And the way they're taught can actually shape their beliefs and how they develop.
So it's a feedback loop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, think about students who are at different points on those developmental ladders we talked about earlier.
Right, like some might be stuck in dualism, thinking there's always one right answer, while others are more comfortable with uncertainty.
Exactly. And they're going to have totally different expectations for their teachers, for how they interact with their classmates, even for how they're assessed.
So a one-size-fits-all approach isn't going to work.
Definitely not. And research shows that these beliefs can even affect how students engage with different learning activities.
Like how they approach a group project or a science experiment.
Exactly. For example, students who have a more constructivist view of learning, they might see a lab experiment as a chance to explore and build their own understanding.
To figure things out for themselves.
Right. But students with a more empiricist view might be totally focused on just getting the right answer.
They'd be following the instructions to the letter.
Right. And the type of instruction itself, it can also influence a student's beliefs about knowledge, although it's not always a simple cause and effect.
So how you teach matters.
It does. More active, student-centered approaches, where students are encouraged to think for themselves and build their own understanding, they can sometimes help students develop more sophisticated beliefs about knowledge.
So encouraging critical thinking and inquiry.
Exactly. But there are also cases where students with really strong fixed beliefs about knowledge, like those who believe it's always certain and absolute, they might hold on to those beliefs even in a more open, constructivist learning environment.
So sometimes those beliefs are pretty deeply ingrained.
They can be. It seems like there's this complex interplay between the students' existing beliefs and the type of instruction they receive.
So there's no magic bullet.
Right. It's a dynamic process. And one thing that's really important is the teacher's own beliefs about knowledge and learning.
So the teacher's personal epistemology matters too.
Oh, absolutely. Because their beliefs are going to influence how they teach and ultimately how their students think about knowledge.
Okay, so both the teacher and the student bring their own beliefs about knowledge to the classroom.
Exactly. And that makes it a really fascinating and dynamic space.
Okay, so what are some practical things educators can do? And for you, the listener, what can you take away from all of this to improve your own learning?
Well, the recommendations really depend on what you're trying to do. Are you focused on fostering students' epistemological development?
Like helping them move up those developmental ladders.
Right. Or are you more focused on addressing those specific beliefs about knowledge that might be hindering learning?
Like the belief in certain knowledge or quick learning.
Exactly. So let's start with promoting development. One big idea is to create a learning environment that's both supportive and challenging.
Like Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. You want to create a stage environment fit where students are pushed to grow, but not overwhelmed.
Okay, so a good balance.
Right. Some early recommendations suggested aiming instruction just slightly above the student's current level of development.
So stretching them without breaking them.
Right. Perry, the guy who developed the Perry scheme, he really emphasized the importance of personal attention from the teacher, building a sense of community in the classroom, and having teachers be open about their own intellectual journeys, their own struggles, and how their thinking has evolved over time.
So modeling that growth mindset for students.
Exactly. And other suggestions include things like encouraging students to ask questions, really valuing their contributions to the class, and creating opportunities for them to actively participate in their learning.
So making it a more interactive and engaging experience.
Right. And in terms of curriculum, approaches that connect learning to students' own experiences and give them chances to actively build meaning together, those can be really powerful.
So making it relevant to their lives and letting them take ownership of their learning.
Exactly. And Baxter Magolda, she found that those learner-centered approaches, where the student is at the heart of the learning process, those are super valuable in college settings.
Okay, so it's about creating a learning environment that's both intellectually stimulating and personally meaningful.
Right. And for more specific strategies, King and Kitchener, the folks who developed the reflective judgment model, they recommend things like using problems that don't have easy answers. You know, those ill-structured problems we talked about earlier.
The messy real-world stuff.
Exactly. They also suggest teaching students how to gather and evaluate information, facilitating discussions on controversial topics, and making those underlying assumptions about knowledge, making them explicit and talking about them openly.
So helping students think critically about the nature of knowledge itself.
Exactly. And it's really important to respect students' starting points, you know, wherever they are on that developmental ladder.
Meeting them where they are.
Right, and providing them with both cognitive feedback, like helping them think more clearly, and emotional support as they grapple with these complex ideas.
So creating a safe and supportive space for intellectual growth.
Exactly.
All right, that all sounds great for promoting development. What about those specific beliefs that might be holding students back? What can we do about those?
Well, there aren't as many specific teaching strategies for directly changing beliefs, but there are some general things that can help. Like, it's important to directly address the idea that knowledge is often interconnected and that there isn't always one right answer.
So challenging those black and white views.
Right. And encouraging students to think critically and evaluate information to avoid bias.
So helping them become more discerning consumers of information.
Exactly. And it's really important to help them understand those fundamental assumptions about knowledge that underlie critical thinking.
Like the idea that knowledge is constantly changing and evolving.
Exactly. And that sometimes viewpoints that seem totally opposite can actually be integrated into a larger understanding.
So embracing complexity and nuance.
Right. And it's also really important to make the knowledge building processes within different disciplines more transparent.
Like showing students how knowledge is created in science versus history versus literature.
Exactly. For example, in science classes, you could talk about how scientific theories are developed and revised over time.
Showing them that science is not about fixed truths, it's an ongoing process.